In the game, he's the final wall between you and freedom, cold, merciless, unbeatable. In the movies, he's the devil with a Greek accent. But the people who actually worshipped this god never called him evil. They called him Plouton, the rich one. And by the end of this video, you'll understand why a civilization obsessed with justice chose the god of the dead as one of the fairest figures in their entire pantheon. This isn't the villain you think you know, and what the myths reveal is stranger and darker than anything a game could invent. When the gods divided the universe after the war against the Titans, they didn't vote, and they didn't fight over it. They drew lots. Zeus won the sky, Poseidon won the sea, and Hades won the one realm none of the others wanted, the Underworld. He didn't seize power. He inherited the job nobody else was willing to do, and then he did it without complaint, without rebellion, and without ever trying to take more than what was his. That single detail mattered enormously to the Greeks. In a pantheon full of gods who lied, cheated, and started wars over pride, Hades is almost eerily consistent. He doesn't leave his realm. He doesn't meddle in the affairs of mortals. He doesn't play favorites. The dead who arrive at his gates are treated the same whether they were kings or beggars in life. And that, to an ancient Greek audience, wasn't terrifying. It was the definition of justice. This is also where his real name gets interesting. Publicly, people avoided saying Hades at all. The name was considered unlucky to speak aloud. Instead, they called him Plouton, the wealthy one, because everything that grows from the earth, every crop, every vein of gold and silver, ultimately comes from his domain below it. He wasn't just the keeper of the dead. He was quietly one of the most powerful economic forces in the entire mythological universe, and almost nobody talks about that part. But if Hades was so fair, so consistent, so undeserving of the villain label, why does nearly every version of his story still involve an act that looks, on the surface, like the cruelest thing a god could do? Here's the story you probably know. Persephone is out picking flowers, the earth splits open, and Hades drags her into the underworld against her will. Her mother Demeter, goddess of the harvest, is so consumed by grief that she lets the entire world starve. Winter is born from her mourning. It's a tragedy, a kidnapping dressed up as a myth about the seasons. But go back to the oldest surviving version of this story, the Homeric hymn to Demeter, and the picture gets far more complicated. Zeus had already promised Persephone to Hades before any of this happened. This wasn't an act of chaos. It was, uncomfortably, a sanctioned arrangement between gods. And when Persephone finally returns to the surface, she doesn't come back broken. She comes back changed, eating 6 pomegranate seeds that bind her to the underworld for part of every year, not because she's tricked, but in several ancient readings, because she chooses to. By the time later cult traditions get hold of this story, Persephone isn't a victim waiting to be rescued. She's a queen who rules half the year on the surface and half the year below it. And in the underworld, she isn't a prisoner. She's co-ruler. Ancient sources describe her issuing judgments alongside Hades, deciding the fate of souls with her own authority. The girl who was taken becomes one of the most powerful figures in the entire Greek cosmos. This isn't a minor detail. It's the foundation of the Eleusinian mysteries, one of the most secretive and sacred religious rites in the ancient world, held for nearly 2,000 years, where initiates swore themselves to silence about what they witnessed. What we do know is this: they believed that understanding Persephone's descent and return prepared them for something after death. Not fear of the underworld, reassurance about it, and the realm they rule together isn't the single grey pit the word underworld suggests. The Greeks described an entire geography down there. The river Styx, whose water was so sacred that even the gods swore unbreakable oaths on it. The river Lethe, where souls drank and forgot their entire mortal lives. A three-headed hound named Cerberus, not guarding people out, guarding them in, making sure that whoever entered never simply wandered back to the surface uninvited. And two very different final destinations. Tartarus, a prison sunk so far beneath the underworld itself that it was said to be as far below Hades as the earth is below the sky, reserved for those who had defied the gods directly, and Elysium, a paradise for the virtuous, green and sunlit. Nothing like the punishment most people imagine when they hear the word underworld at all. Three judges, Minos, Rhadamanthus, and Aeacus, all former mortal kings known for their fairness in life, decided which souls went where. Even judgment itself wasn't left to whim. It had a system. So if Hades is fair, his kingdom has structure, and Persephone becomes powerful, not powerless. Where does the darkness the game leans into actually come from? It's not from Hades. It's from someone else entirely. In one of the strangest and least told versions of Greek mythology, Persephone has a son. His name is Zagreus, and depending on the source, he's either fathered by Zeus or already destined to inherit the throne of the universe itself. The Titans, the same beings Zeus overthrew to become king of the gods, are jealous, and they want him gone, so they lure him. They give the infant Zagreus a set of toys, a mirror, a top, a set of knuckly bones. And while he's distracted, admiring his own reflection, they tear him apart with their bare hands. Athena manages to save his heart. Zeus, in a fury, strikes the Titans down with lightning and burns them to ash. And here is where the story stops being a myth about one god's tragic family and becomes a myth about every single human being alive. Because according to the Orphic tradition, humanity was born from that ash, a mixture of the Titan's violence and the divine spark of Zagreus's heart still burning inside it. We are, in this telling, part monster and part god, forever pulled between the two. This is the version of the underworld the game never quite shows you, not a place ruled by evil, but a family shaped by loss, betrayal, and the strange machinery of rebirth. The Escape the Underworld story you've played through has ancient roots stretching back to a cult that genuinely believed the soul could be purified, could be born again, and that even the darkest place in the universe might not be the end. This isn't just a story that survived in old texts either. Archaeologists have found thin sheets of gold, folded small enough to fit in a fist, buried with the dead across Greece and southern Italy, some over 2,000 years old. They're inscribed with instructions for the soul, which spring not to drink from in the underworld, which one to seek out instead, and the exact words to say to the guardians waiting there to prove you belonged among the initiated, not among the ordinary dead. People were buried with a literal map for what came next, written by a tradition that treated Zagreus's death and rebirth as a promise, not a horror story. So Hades was never the villain. He didn't choose his kingdom. He didn't betray anyone to get it, and he ruled it with a fairness the other gods rarely bothered with. Persephone wasn't a victim frozen in a single terrible moment. She became one of the most powerful figures in the underworld's history. And the darkness people associate with this myth doesn't come from either of them. It comes from what was done to a child, and what humanity was built from because of it. We didn't inherit this story from the Greeks who told it. We inherited a flattened version of it. Hero, villain, victim, monster, because that's easier to sell than a god who's actually just doing his job fairly, in the one place nobody else wanted to rule. If this is the myth you thought you knew, Tell me in the comments which part surprised you the most, and if you want to go deeper into what actually happened inside the Eleusinian mysteries. The rite that made ancient Greeks stop fearing death entirely. That's exactly where we are heading next.